Hello, everyone. We are continuing our series of interviewing the experts when it comes to coronavirus and mental health. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Ross Szabo. And now, Ross is somebody we've done a lot of work with. He's a Flawless board member, and he is the go to guy for everything with teens and young adults. So I just want to say welcome and thank you again for joining us, Ross.
Thanks so much for having me.
And so the first thing that I want to dive into is, the coronavirus is the top thing in the news right now, and people are getting anxious. So a question we've been asking everybody, and I want to get your perspective, is how should people be managing their anxiety at this time?
My advice isn't much different from some things you hear out there already, which is like stay away from watching the news 24 hours a day. Outside of that, though, I think it's important to just really learn what you need each day. So if you're somebody who's like, I need these facts, I need these figures, I need to see what's going on, you can get that quickly. You don't need to hear about every single case of it. So the first part is just trying to understand and conceptualize the information that is occurring. If you are overwhelmed with information and you are somebody who knows you get overwhelmed with information and it raises your anxiety, then you definitely need to step away. So that first part is just the informational piece. The second part is the coping piece. You can use this time to connect with people more. You can use this time to check in with people that maybe you haven't checked in with. You can set up time to like talk to different people, see different people. And then there's other things you can do to just get creative. There's all kinds of like, the most wild part of this is how much online stuff there is now. Meditation, yoga, exercise, workouts, like all kinds of stuff. I think the hardest part about this question of how do we take care of ourselves is how do we stay motivated? We don't live in a society anymore where you can be like, oh, I just didn't know that I shouldn't eat 2 boxes of Oreos a day. Who knew that information?
Right.
But we do live in a society that's so overwhelming with information that a lot of us just get shut down and lack the motivation to do any of it. So you can download 700 free workout exercises. Are you going to do one of them? And that's the question, is what is actually going to motivate you? And usually what motivates people to stop procrastinating is to actually address the emotions that are leading to the procrastination. So if you feel anxious, nervous, scared, tired, bored, angry, whatever else, you're less likely to do the workout. You're less likely to meditate. You're less likely to do the yoga because you have this barrier that's blocking you from it. So it's really important to know, like, all the information's out there. What's actually going to motivate you to do it? Do you need a friend? Do you need someone to be on FaceTime with you and you have like a workout buddy? Like, what's actually going to motivate you to make that change? And then when you make that change slowly, hopefully it gets more routine for you.
Awesome. And I see you're representing some of the gear now. So can you tell us a little bit about your work with Geffen Academy and anything that you're doing to support those students now?
Yeah, so Geffen Academy is a school for students in grades 6 through 12. So it's a middle school, high school. And it was started on UCLA's campus to innovate education. Last week, we went to a remote learning schedule. UCLA is going to be doing remote learning for their college students through June. They canceled graduation. They canceled all major events, sports, everything else. We're still deciding how that's going to impact us. We are doing remote learning for students in grades 6 through 12. And what we're trying to do is, one, set up a schedule for all students to follow. So we're not just saying like, hey, we're just doing remote learning. We have actual blocks of time that we've established for each class, and then recommendations for like PE, meditation, stress breaks, like all kinds of other stuff to help them work on different things while they are going through this time. That structure and that routine is something that people of every age need. I think one of the hardest things right now is a lot of our teachers have kids that are now at home. So they have to manage online teaching their students and online teaching their kids. And it's a lot. So one of the best ways to help the mental health of people of all ages is to have an actual schedule. You wake up at this time, you do this at this time, you try these different things at this time. And that can really help provide structure and balance. When things are unpredictable, the best thing you can do is provide predictability. Outside of that, we have resources for kids to talk about how they feel, to have conversations with their classes online, and to really kind of make sure that they're still connecting. And then if students are falling through the cracks where they're not like attending class, they're not doing their assignments, everything else, then we have a whole protocol in place to like check in with them and see how they're doing and make sure they're okay. But I think the most important thing for students right now is to have an actual schedule that you follow. Because if you're just kind of like going through the motions, you're like, oh yeah, I'll wake up at some point, I'll have breakfast at some point, then
Mhm.
I'll eat lunch at some point, I'll go to bed whenever I feel like it. It just doesn't provide. It's going to raise your anxiety, increase your loneliness and your depression. It's not actually going to help you.
And so, is there anything more that you can touch on? Because you've done a lot of work with high schools. You've actually even spoken at my alma mater, Oxford Academy, down in West Palm Beach, Florida. So, besides the academic side of things, is there anything more you want to say to someone who maybe a young teen dealing with anxiety and depression right now?
Well, I think the most important thing when we're in times of uncertainty and when life feels overwhelming, it's really important to care more and not less. It's important to engage more, to love more, to reach out to people you might have had beef with in the past that you haven't talked to. Focus on your coping skills, whatever they are. If it's listening to music, if it is talking to somebody, if it's gaming, whatever it is, like what you have to start understanding is there's a difference between releasing your emotions and reinforcing your emotions. So,
Mhm.
for example, somebody might game to release their emotions and they're like playing a game and they're getting their energy and anger or whatever out. And at a certain point, playing that game for so long just reinforces whatever they're feeling. And it doesn't actually help them connect, it actually makes them disconnect. Same thing with music, same thing with all kinds of coping mechanisms. In this time period, it's really important to see, like, oh, this helps me release my emotions. This just reinforces everything bad in me. And I think that's the clearest kind of advice I can give you. If you are on quarantine, if you're on social distancing, pay attention to what helps you feel good and pay attention to when that goes so far that it actually just reinforces what's wrong.
Okay, and earlier you mentioned the teachers and parents. So, what advice would you have for them who may be working from home now and also have these children that are at home with them?
Yeah, I think for them, the key is really to make sure they are taking care of themselves amidst it. And even if that means like having a moment for yourself after your kids go to sleep, having a moment for yourself before your kids wake up. If you start losing your own mental health, you're not going to be able to really be there for other people. And so, however, you can take care of yourself away from your family or obviously with your family is good, but you need a moment to kind of center yourself. A lot of people are saying like this has just been a beautiful time for them to connect with their kids in a way they never saw before. Like they're actually seeing how their kids learn. They're actually paying attention to what their kids need. They're actually there with them all the time, which is not something we get to do. And so outside of taking that time to center yourself, remember to like practice gratitude and be grateful for some of the things that are happening. This might be the most time you get to spend with your family since you've had them. And that obviously is going to have some frustrations. It's going to have some quick triggers. It's going to have the constant like pattern of escalations, but it can also be a really good thing where you do get to learn something new about your family that you didn't get to know before.
So, you've been very open about your mental health challenges dating back to high school. And if you were speaking to a younger Ross or young students today who are living with pre existing brain health challenges and are under higher than normal stress, what would you say to them right now?
I think the most important thing that I say, like with all my students, is to just be honest with where you are right now. If you are somebody who is scared or is nervous or is worried or is coping ineffectively, really think about how long you've been doing that and what you can do to change it. The only way to actually address the emotions that we're feeling is to be completely honest about what's happening. And a lot of times, because we have shame and embarrassment, or we feel like we should just be able to suck it up, or we feel like we should just be able to move forward on our own, we don't necessarily address the barriers that are preventing us from um, being vulnerable and being honest and being open. So I think no matter what age you are, but especially if you're young, it's going to be really important for you to use that self-awareness and just be honest with where you are. There's no judgment here. This pandemic is going to affect every single person in much different ways, but you can only control what you do to cope with it. You know, we can't ever change the causes of stress, but we can change the way we cope with it. So being honest and working past those barriers that prevent us from being honest is the most important thing.
Mhm. So we've spoken a lot about high school age students, but I also want to get the college age students and something you would advise for college age students is to remember that if it takes a little bit longer than normal than the traditional 4 years in college to graduate, that's okay. And everyone's path is different. And so this is something that's really been on my mind because my sister was studying abroad in New Zealand, and they're sending all the study abroad kids home now, but her credits are not going to transfer. So she's a little concerned about that, maybe having to pick up another semester in school. So can you just speak more to that, given what a lot of college students are going through right now?
Yeah, a lot of college students put pressure on themselves to kind of get things done in a timeline that works for them. I think that no matter what happens here, this issue is going to really mess things up for a little bit. And my path to graduating college took around 6 years, and in and out of different colleges. I think I went to 4 total colleges and had a lot of different experiences. Trying to manage bipolar disorder and go to college with a substance abuse issue was not easy. And so if you're in that situation, I think we all have to kind of pull back and realize like we have to do the best that we can right now. So it is beneficial to really understand that like it may not be ideal, but this is a time to really think about like what works for you and what's going to work for your future. And unfortunately, we're going to have a new state of normalcy for a little bit. And if it takes you 5 or 7 or 8 or 9 years, it's okay. You have to do what is going to be helpful for you the most. And also, if you are in a situation where you have support while you're doing that, like take it.
Mhm.
If you have a safe roof over your head, if you're not sick, if you're not going through those things, like this is going to be a really big time for Americans to really understand what sacrifice is again, and to start taking those steps to really have appreciation and gratitude for what they can, because this isn't going to go by quickly. This is probably a year to 18 months of uncertainty. And so the sooner that you can get comfortable with who you are and what you need, the more it's going to help.
That's great advice for college students. And, I remember us having a great conversation about sports when we were together in LA. And, so there's also college athletes, and a lot of them are seeing their seasons get cut short. And you even have seniors who unknowingly had their seasons over with, and they played their last game and they didn't even get to say goodbye in, the proper way. So what advice would you have for these college athletes?
Man, I think what's so tough about sports is when you are a student athlete, it becomes your identity. And it's become your identity for so long. Like so a lot of people start playing the sport they're good at when they're 6. So by the time they're in college, they think it's going to be their future. And, the harsh reality for a lot of people is you don't get drafted, you don't get to go pro, and you have to face that identity and that change in your identity pretty quickly. But with this stuff, man, it's amplified even more than that. Like March Madness was canceled. All spring sports are canceled. Like you don't get the satisfaction of that last game or that last moment or that last chance. And if you're in that situation, one, you have to reconcile who you are outside of sports. Every single major athlete has talked about this. Shaquille O'Neal talked about going through such a massive state of depression when he retired that he really didn't think there was a future until Inside the NBA called and gave him a job. Dwayne Wade went right into therapy after he retired because he knew he wasn't going to be able to handle the change. And there's so many people who never even reach that professional level who feel the same way. So you should take some time to mourn what you lost. You should take some time to feel how you feel. There's nothing wrong with that. The other challenge, though, is most people cope by playing that sport. So now not only did they not get their last moment, but their main coping mechanism is gone. And this is a time to really learn about who you are and find different things that you appreciate about yourself. And if you don't actually know that, ask your friends, ask your family, like, hey, who do you see me as outside of this? And you might find that you're an amazing friend or a great uncle or like some kind of like other family member or things like that. And you're going to have to build your identity off of that. And then also, you can still play your sport alone with that social distancing. You can still go for a run. You can still lift weights. You can still do that stuff. But it does suck when you don't have your team anymore and you don't have the other things that have been supporting you for so long. So focus on who you are outside of that identity as an athlete, and really think about what you can do to cope during this time.
I'm so glad that you brought up social distancing because with people being quarantined and self-isolating, we're losing a lot of that connectedness that, makes everything so important and valuable. So what advice for us as a community as we get further away physically, how do we remain close without that physical connection?
I think it's shared interest, and it is connecting in the ways that are important to you. So if that is texting, if that is FaceTime, if that is a phone call, if that is listening to the same music at the same time and having your own dance party together, if that is, you know, just doing something to connect, that's going to be the most important part. And every individual is different for that. There are a lot of people who are introverted who are like, this is the best couple weeks of my life. I don't have to be out there. I don't have to be on. I don't have to talk to people. And there are other people who are dying from it. And so it's just really important, again, to find what works best for you, to find the motivation to be the person who connects other people in your life. It doesn't matter what that is, but you might need to be the connector. You might need to be the one who's like, hey, can we all like get on FaceTime and connect or do this thing because I miss you guys. And that's where that honesty is going to be really important. And again, if you're in a family situation where you don't have that time, you have to create that time. You have to create that space to be like, hey, I love all of you. I really need this space to talk to this other person.
Now, I'll leave you with this, Ross. What are some of the things that you're doing to increase your self-care that maybe someone watching, might want to practice?
Man, it's only day 4 for me, and I have been so inundated with work that like I haven't necessarily had a free moment to like be like, oh, how do I do self-care? I think the things that we have been doing in my household are cooking meals together, making sure we eat together, making sure we turn off devices and television and talk to each other, play board games. I really want to go for a run. It's been raining so much in LA. I haven't really been able to get that chance. But when I do, I'll be able to do it. And then I think next week, when I don't have as much work, start really like adhering to a schedule. So wake up at this certain time, eat breakfast, create like space for the online workouts, yoga, stuff like that. But I just haven't had a lot of time yet. But when I do, like that's what I'm going to focus on.
Awesome. Ross, again, thank you so much for finding the time to speak to us and to get your advice out there. For those watching, if you want more from Ross, make sure to follow him on Twitter and check out his website. We're going to add that below. And again, thank you so much, Ross.
Thanks so much, Trey. Hang in there, man.
Yes, sir.